Question 1. Firstly, my film uses a convention of intertextuality. My film is intertextual of the popular TV series Breaking Bad, and the intertextuality is a common convention of postmodern films. The scene that is intertextual in my film is where the main character appears to be having a blank of mind when she's staring off into the distance with a monotone drone in the background.
Mr. White? Mr. White?
Yes.
You understood what I've just said to you.
Yes. Lung cancer. Inoperable.
This is a pastiche of the scene from the beginning of Breaking Bad, where he's told that he has cancer and he doesn't know how to respond. My film celebrates rather than mocks the scene from Breaking Bad that it is imitating.
Yes, I'm fine. Can we stop for a moment? Could I use the bathroom?
Secondly, my film also uses the conventions of randomness of postmodern films. In my film there's a sense of randomness that out of context of my film probably wouldn't make sense, but it's clear that it's following the conventions of a postmodern film, as it's a standard thing for it to happen in these sort of films. It works. The film jumps and cuts in random ways that mirror the thought process of the main character. She's nervous and stuttery, and most importantly, she is guilty. It is not made apparent in a solid way until at the end of the film she is guilty of the crime. However, with the use of these random cuts and jumps and effects that I've added using Final Cut Pro, it makes a huge hint towards the idea that she is guilty and makes it apparent. However, my film does also challenge some of the conventions of real media products. For example, in short films it's often the case that it has an open narrative, meaning that the meaning behind the text is up for interpretation. However, in my film, although it appears for the majority of it that it's going to be an open narrative, meaning that people who watch it are able to take their own view of the film, leaving up for interpretation on who kidnapped the boy and whether it was the main character or not. At the end of the film, however, it is made clear that it is the woman who you expect it to be. By doing this, it allows the viewer to appreciate the editing done throughout the film because, as I mentioned earlier, it makes it clear when watching the film back that the editing is clearly hinting towards the guilt of the character. And this isn't a common thing in a postmodern film. Throughout my main product and all of my ancillary texts, there has been a consistent theme, all aimed at the same target audience. My film features many postmodern conventions, such as blurry flashbacks and scenes that by themselves wouldn't necessarily make sense. My poster also follows these conventions, as I've added a unique and creative spin to what would have been a less creative and simple picture by itself. The poster makes it clear that the woman may have two sides to her, as there is a Rembrandt-style highlighting on the side of her face, which is one of the first conventions that I learned when I started doing my media course at AS level. I've also created a Wix website that is aimed at my target audience. It contains reviews aimed at the more educated film watchers and those who will understand and appreciate postmodern films. The website is called Know Your Film, and it not only has a fairly complex layout that would be more suited to a more refined target audience, but the films that are reviewed on the site are ones that are more likely to be reviewed by a more film buff, specialised audience, if you will. Furthermore, in my film and my poster and my website containing the review, the same engaged title is displayed. This is so that all the texts are consistent, and when someone thinks of the film Engaged, they will think of the text that is shown everywhere the film is mentioned. It is a kind of logo that is extremely effective with word of mouth and the reputation of my film. First of all, at the start of the course, my audience feedback allowed me to fully construct my storyline. I developed a questionnaire asking things, for example, such as what the crime in the film should be. I came up with a list of ideas, such as murder, kidnapping, robbery, and asked my audience to fill out a questionnaire and choose which one they believed would be most interesting. And I took all of these into account, and it allowed me to craft the storyline and the crime that happens in my film. In contrast, however, I also needed audience feedback towards the end of my film. I required audience feedback to help me create my final product and add the finishing touches to the film. With my music, I had the help of James Miller to help me construct it, and we came up with several different versions of the soundtrack for the film, but I wasn't sure which one suited my film the most. So what I did is I took a few members from my audience and asked them to watch my film with different pieces of music edited in, and I asked them to decide which one they felt was most appropriate for the film. After watching all of the versions, all of the audience gave the same response of the first piano track that they believe was the most appropriate for the film. I started to watch all of them over and over again, and I also ended up agreeing with the majority, and that is how I have ended up with the final product that I have now. This year, when constructing my film, although I did use another program, Final Cut Pro, for the majority of my film it was edited on Final Cut Express. Although I used it last year, I managed to develop my skills in this program further and create new effects which I would never have been able to do last year. This year, I've added colour correction to my film, which is something I've recently learned to do and didn't know how to do last year. I've changed the blacks and the whites, the mids and the saturation to come up with a colour setting that firstly, for the woman's scene, blends her coat into the background, making her seem inconspicuous, however, brings her bright pink top out and making her the centre of attention, contrasting her boring, dull, blended-in green jacket. Furthermore, in the man's scene, I have made his jacket appear jet black, as well as the shadows on his face being darkened to make him seem more intimidating, although in the film he doesn't appear it. During the construction phase of my film, I also edited my flashback scenes in a very original and creative way, making each flashback as the film developed more and more clear, with the blur decreasing by each one. I did this by using the dip fade to colour tool and the addition of sounds such as heartbeats. It allowed me to create the flashback effect that I hadn't seen in any films before. The dip to fade was extremely fast and it faded to white rather than the standard effect of black.